One of the things Lisa didn't tell you, and I know you probably all know this, I've known Lisa for a while, and Lisa's kind of our fearless leader. Lisa is the chair of the National Coalition for Community Schools, and is really kind of, you know, you have a hero right in your midst, leading the network of this work across the country. And I've learned a lot from Lisa. And the interesting thing is, this is kind of like returning home. Because I was here to learn from you in 1995. So, and brought the learning that I learned from California back to our school district, and that'll be part of the story. Now, you talk about the sisters, you know, there's 8 of us girls and my poor dad, but I was the oldest. And right now we're in the negotiation of communication, and I'm a little distracted. My mother went into the emergency room on Sunday night. So she's in the hospital, and we're negotiating communication right now, 2,000 miles away. So I'm trying to boss them around from here. They're not listening to me. And anyway, but it is a negotiation, right? Even the people that are absolutely the closest to you, the people that mean more to you than anything in the world, you still have to learn how to communicate. And so we're going to talk a little bit about lessons learned. I learned a lot, and one of the things about Chicago when I saw Kendall, you learn the most from your mistakes. So I'm just going to bare my soul today, so you're going to hear a lot about the mistakes we made and the lessons we learned from those mistakes as we navigated the work. So you did a great job. I was a kindergarten teacher, and so part of what we talk about, these are the goals. And the other thing I want to share with you is I am a person, and you need to know this, and I tell everybody that ever comes in contact with me, I process everything orally, everything. So people misunderstand me a lot because I do that. So I've had to kind of disclose that in my partnerships with the community and everybody, because they think, you know, it's kind of bossy. But anyway, Kendall and I have been talking, and Dina and others from this community since October. And so I've asked Kendall to keep me on track. She knows you all. She knows kind of what you're wanting to know. So she's going to be feeding me questions if I need to dive deeper. And she's going to be representing you. And hopefully maybe if there's time at the end, and I know this afternoon we'll have more dialogue, okay? Because that's how I do my work. These are my goals for today, is that you have a better understanding of how this school strategy, and I think you probably already know that one. I'm going to talk a little bit about our process and how we built one school and moved it to a district. And hopefully I'm going to be able to tell you some best practices. Hopefully I'm going to be learning a lot from you. And then talk to you a little bit about a system-wide approach and how we moved into that. Here's a little bit about who we are. We're located in the very southern tip, and I have someone here in the front row that I happen to sit next to that actually was born in Indianapolis, which is in the middle of the state. But we're kind of right down, I mean, we can like spit and hit Kentucky. We're right across the border. And so we are a consolidated school district, so I know some of you are rural settings. We actually we serve 39 schools, so we serve the whole county as well as the city. We're the 3rd largest school district in the state of Indiana. We're considered urban. When I started in central office, when I came to central office, 36% of our 24,000 students were on free and reduced lunch, and it continues to rise. We're at 58% right now. So we are a demographic that's changing. And so now this picture on the left is the school that I started at as a kindergarten teacher, and that's what it looked like when I started in 1988. That picture wasn't taken in 1988, and they weren't doing all of that. And then this is what the building looks like now, okay? And there's a story behind that. And so I want to tell you the story because there were a lot of learnings, and I will start there. So I might come back to that picture, but it's important to you to kind of see. This building was built on the location of this building, and just remember that, in 2011, and this is the Cedar Hall Community School. Lisa talked a little bit about equity, and she talked about meeting the needs of kids. And one of the things that our community partners ask me time and time again, why are you doing this? What is this about? It really is about creating equity for all kids. It really is about making sure that every child, every day, has what they need to be successful, and that their families have what they need. And as a kindergarten teacher, I saw kids coming into my classroom every day that didn't have all of those things. And Lisa talked about the 60s and 70s. I went to school at that time. I had dentists that came into my school and put fluoride on my teeth. And I had doctors that gave me my immunizations. And how many of you remember those little sugar cubes of polio stuff that you had to get in while you were at school? All of those services were in our school. And guess what? I wasn't in a public school at that time. I was in a parochial school. But those services were just there for kids and families. And the one thing that I'll say is that No Child Left Behind, in all its ugliness, really did what? It made us focus on the kids that needed us to focus on the most. And I remember being in Washington, D.C., because when I left Cedar Hall in 2000, I was in charge of Title I for our district. And it was right when No Child Left Behind came out, hit, and we had to come to Washington to learn about the law. And the educators were mad, and they were screaming and hollering, "What do you mean by 2014 all kids will reach the bar? What, are you crazy? That can't happen." All the excuses that you hear all the time. And there was an attorney who was taking the hit. I mean, it was a room about this size, and the attorney was taking the hit from D.C., and he was listening. And finally, he got real quiet, and he looked at the audience, and he said, "How many of you flew here on an airplane?" Everybody raised their hand. And he said, "How many of you, if the pilot would have come on the airplane intercom and said, 80% of you will get there safely, the rest of you are going down, how many of you would have stayed on the airplane?" And the room got quiet. And he said, "Unless we believe that we can level the playing field and ensure that all kids are successful, then that has to be our goal. We can't lower it to 80% or 75% because we don't think everybody's going to get there." He said, "We have to believe that every kid, and we create systems that every kid's going to be successful." So that said something to me. Let me see. I want to make sure that I hit it. Okay. I'm going to read something to you. And this is the beginning of our story. And I think Lisa will be happy. There's a wonderful lady, okay, and this is how our story started. This book came out in 1994, okay? And in the introduction of this book, Joy Dreyfus wrote this: "I see more than ever the importance of joining the full-service community school movement with the school reform movement. I hope this book will encourage more educators to open their doors to community agencies eager to act as partners in creating new kinds of youth and family-serving institutions. Hopefully, health, mental health, and social service practitioners will continue their uphill battle to gain support for more complex schools. I am convinced that the buildings we call schools must look and feel much different in the 21st century if we're to produce young people with the requisite skills to become responsible adults." Pretty insightful lady. Well, where our story started, I told you I was a kindergarten teacher, and by No Child Left Behind standards, this was prior to No Child Left Behind, we were a low-performing school. We were the highest poverty school in the district. We had we were the one neighborhood school that was probably left in our community. And so we were also, it was at the point where schools were beginning to look at, and for those of you who are not educators, if there's something I need to clarify, just say clarify it. Schools that were receiving Title I money, which is federal money, were moving and shifting from something called targeted assisted Title I schools to school-wide, which meant that schools began to receive funding for all the kids in their schools if their schools hit a certain level of poverty. one of the requirements when you shifted from targeted assisted, we were the second school to say we are going to go to a school-wide program. We had one other school that had already gone through the process. You have to go through a year of planning, and you have to really look at your data and examine your data. Well, we were having a lot of conversation inside our school as we were going through that planning about what strategies do we need to put in place to ensure that kids are going to be successful. And at the same time, down the street, is there somebody here from United Way? Anybody here from United Way? Good, I'm glad you're here. Our local United Way, local United Ways do a lot of needs assessments. They do needs assessments in their community to determine what are the high priorities for their community. In 1988, United Way had done a needs assessment, and it was determined that there were not after-school programs for children from high poverty areas. So United Way had received a significant amount of money from Eli Lilly because they would give grants to their local United Ways, and those dollars were invested in after-school programs in 4 schools, and our school was one of them. But United Way was really smart because what they said was, we're not just going to give it all to the schools. Here's your pot of money, and it's split evenly, 50-50, between the community agencies that serve kids in after-school programs and the school, and you all have to work together. You have to sit down at the table and you have to figure out how you're going to do this with this pot of money. So that was kind of the catalyst for this community collaboration with our community partners, because prior to that, our community partners did what they did best and schools did what they did, but they weren't really at the table together. So that was going on. Then in 1994, they did another comprehensive needs assessment of the community and found out that our children and families and community residents who were in poverty had a great deal of difficulty accessing the resources they needed, because you all are here because you work with people who need to access resources. What do? We send them all over Timbuktu. They have to go over here for this, then they have to go over here for this, they have to go over here for this, they have to take off work to be able to navigate the system. So the idea was presented that we do this one-stop shop for the community to come together, and so parents or community residents could come into this place and all the agencies would be represented and they could get there and get served. The political will did not exist in our community to support that. They had even identified a building that they were going to put it in. At the same time, there was a lot going on in our school community. We started the first neighborhood association. There was a lot of interest in building that community. So we were fortunate that that didn't happen the way it was supposed to, because United Way came knocking on our door and they said, what if we did it inside a school? What if we created this concept of one-stop shop inside of a school building? So we thought that sounded kind of cool, and we said that really makes sense, and we had begun to build the relationships with a lot of our community partners in the area. And so they funded a person to come live with us. And that was a master level social worker, much like Kendall, who had a lot of experience in system work. So he came and we thought, okay, now what? So we began to do some research and began to think about this and what it would look like. And I was at home, I'll never forget, I was sitting on my deck drinking coffee on a Saturday morning, and I was reading one of those educational periodicals, and there was a wonderful article by this woman, Joy Dreyfus. And the name of the article was Full Service Community Schools. And I'm sitting there and I go, oh my gosh, it has a name. I mean, it really does have a name. I mean, somebody else is doing this. So I jumped up and I called this social worker on the phone on Saturday. He wasn't happy with me because it was really early. And I said, you're just not going to believe this. So we started publishing, like running off 1 million copies of the articles, passing it out to the staff. And we said, we wonder if we could get a hold of her to find out what she knows. So we back in 1994, Google and all that wasn't really there. So it was a little bit of a challenge, but we found her name and she was in the phone book. So we called her, and you know, she answers the phone, and we told her who she was. She's answering her own phone, and this book had just come out, and she said, "Oh, I'd be glad to talk to you." So we started, you know, telling her what we were trying to do, and she got real excited. And she said, "Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to go on a road trip, and you need to visit communities, because this is a movement that's starting in the United States. People are beginning to think about this." And so she told us where to go. And we had money from Lily so we could travel. And we came here. This was one of the places we came. So we came here. We went to Detroit, Michigan. They had health centers. We went to St. Louis. We found the Children's Aid Society in New York. We found stuff going on in Iowa. We went all over. And boy, did we ask questions. And we collected all their tools. And we, you know, talked to them. And then Joy would call and check on us. What'd you find out? How's that going for you? So then we came back with all this information and all this learning from all the communities that we had been to. But our community was not the same as all those communities. Just like you're not the same as us. So whatever you learn from me, you know, some of it you'll throw in the garbage. Some of it might help you. And that's kind of what we did. And then we said, how do we educate our community here in Evansville about what we learned? Now, we could just share all the information and that would be fine, but how could we do it? So we had a forum much like you have right now. There were about this many people there. And we called up all these communities that we had visited and asked if someone would come and share. And every community accepted the invitation. Not one of them charged us. We paid for their travel. They came. But they did it in the spirit of collaboration because they understood that this is about collaboration. And that's how it started for us. So we did this conference. Then we took all that we learned, and we decided, okay, now what do we do with this? There's a wonderful book by the name of Building Communities from the Inside Out by Jody Kretzmann that we used as our guiding Bible, I should say. And we had Jody Kretzmann come to the community. And what Jody said is, you have to first map the assets of your community. You have to, sometimes what people do when they work inside poor communities, where do we focus? We focus on the deficits. We're going to fix people, right? And what Jody Kretzmann said is there are amazing assets inside of communities, especially inside of communities where there are a lot of people who face challenges, because you know what? They know how to navigate those challenges better than we do in many cases. So what we did is we pulled together the community and we asked parents. I'm glad there's some parents here. We asked businesses. There weren't a lot of businesses in our community, but we asked representatives from businesses. And we had a series of meetings, not just one, but we had a series of meetings where we mapped assets. We didn't talk about anything but assets. We didn't talk about challenges. We looked at the glass half full instead of half empty. And we mapped, and I still have them, and they're up in my attic, or I would have brought them. They're probably going to fall apart when I open them up. That's how old I am. But anyway, they would, I would bet they would fill the whole front of this room. They had never, ever, ever been asked to do that before. Never. So then when we introduced their challenges, we took the word needs completely out of our vocabulary. We said we were never going to use that word. Challenges. Not needs, challenges. Guess what, guys? That maybe took up half of that wall. And we kept this up and that, and we said to the community, oh my goodness. Huge. Then we asked them to prioritize what they wanted us to work on. We didn't decide that. They did. And they didn't pick the same things we would have picked. They picked 3 things. The first thing they picked was there were a lot of families in that community that did not have their GED. And it was very difficult for them to go across town to get their GED when they had kids in school and all of that. So they asked if we could set up a GED site in our school. That was the #1 thing. Number two, they didn't have a lot of programs for kids. When their kids would transition to middle school and high school, they weren't the kids that were on the baseball teams or the basketball teams because they didn't have a lot of the experiences to be able to learn those skills to the level they needed to. So they wanted some kind of summer activities, like they really actually wanted a baseball program is what they wanted. That was two. And the third one, there was a young man that lived across the street that was killed in a gang-related activity. He was shot and killed. And they wanted to get some kind of good gang club for kids. And that was their third goal. So what we said is, here are our assets. Do we have anything here that we can use to help with those three things? One of the assets we had a lady who owned a secondhand shop in our community whose son played professional baseball. She said, I'll take that. Then, and that's another story in itself, and I'll tell you a little bit about that story because that really changed us in ways that I can't even imagine. Then the GEDs, I said, oh, I'll take care of that one. So I called downtown and I said, I was a new principal. You just call downtown, right? You just ask. So I called downtown and I said, I need a GED program at my school. Sure. Of course we can help you. Maybe. So they let me ask about 2 or 3, 4 times. And finally, I'm pretty persistent, and I kept saying, but that's what they want. So finally they pacified me by saying, get 15 parents who sign up and we can make it fiscally possible to do it. So get that to happen, and we're the principals in the room. Any principals? Okay, so what would you think the first thing I did? Oh, I created great flyers, right? And I sent the flyers out. And then what else did I do? Oh, I sent letters home because, they said they wanted it, right? And I did all that. And I got it all ready and I sent it home. Oh, yeah, newsletter too, right. Newsletter, yeah, great. I did a newsletter. So guess what happened? Not much. But I had one person sign up. Her name was Paula. And every day, guess what? Paula. Mrs. Gray, when is the GED program coming? He said, Paula, nobody, okay, I'm working on it, I'm working on it. And I remember going back, I had just read Joy's book, and I said, you are really dumb. So finally, I said to Paula, go get me 15 people. How long did it take Paula to get me 15 people? 2 days. So not just 15, I think there were 20 on the list. So, and what was really funny is here's Paula, parking lot after school, walking up to cars, handing them the flyer saying, I'm not kidding, you need to come. So it was really pretty cool because that was my first real learning. This is not about us, guys. This is really about the voice of the people who you serve. We are servants, right? So it took me a while to kind of, I let the principal stuff go to my head. So anyway, so we got it started, and it was really cool. And remember when Even Start funding started hitting? We were positioned then after a few years to write for that grant, and that actually helped us grow that GED program. But here's the story of Paula. Here's what's really cool. So Paula, she had a lot of things going on, but Paula was the first person who actually finished her GED. So she finishes the GED, and then you can't do testing at the same site, so she had to go across town to get the test. So, we said, oh yeah, we'll drive you. So then I realized the social worker who came to live with us said, we got to think about how we do this. So we said, okay, we'll go with you on the city bus to teach you how to do that, basically. We didn't say to teach you because that would be condescending, so we'll go with you. And what the social worker found out on that trip across town is that little girl had been molested on a bus when she was a kid. And that's why she wasn't taking the city bus anywhere. But we knew if she didn't learn how to do that, once she got her GED and needed a job, she wouldn't be able to get a job because she didn't drive. So that was an important thing that we had to work with her to teach her. So we dropped her off. She said, I can get back by myself. I want to come back on the bus by myself. Came back. The bus driver even gave her balloons. She'd get off the bus. She was so happy. So she gets off the bus. She's real happy, and she passes and ends up getting a job outside the community. And I mean, it was great. She's really a success story. Now, I need to share the other part of it because you told him I got that, like, Milliken Award thing. But that wasn't about me. That was about the community. So here's what happens sometimes when you're really successful, and it wasn't me that was successful, it was a community that was successful. So this GED program had great results. I mean, we had lots of people getting their GED. So they did this wonderful story about this program. Well, guess, and the superintendent was wonderful, and he really was very, very supportive of our work and really, really wanted to make sure that this work continued. So he was always turning the press's eye on the work we were doing, which was great because it gained some momentum in the community where people were really working with us. But when the story came out about the GED, where was the spotlight? It's on me. So guess who came knocking on my door? Paula. And she said, wait a minute, I did this. So the other lesson learned is, if you really are wanting to empower a community, make sure the spotlight gets shined on the people who are making it happen. Because when you leave, that's what ends up, you know what I'm saying? When you leave, the community ends up owning it. So there's lots of examples. The lady who started the baseball league, we had 120 kids playing baseball. Every team was coached by a parent. We had sessions to teach the parents how to be coaches because they had not done that before. And, you know, it was kind of interesting and it was kind of funny because how many of you have had kids who have played Little League? The dynamic at a Little League field and is unbelievable. And so they weren't kind of prepared for that part. So I went to every game and had my little chair and would watch. And in the beginning, they were wanting me to resolve the issues rather than resolving themselves. So here's the classic one. So they come running over one day and say, that kid over there's got a gun. I said, what kid? I said, that kid over there playing basketball. I know the kid. I had him in kindergarten. So I go over there and I said, do you have a gun? He said, a squirt gun? I said, they think it's a real gun. Would you put it away? But it was, they didn't know how to do that, and so it was really teaching them how to do that. That program's still going strong. They built their own concession stand. The kids were out there. They took care of the field. They did all of that themselves. I mean, it was absolutely amazing, and they still are doing it themselves. Okay? Now, fast forward. And I'm jumping around a little bit, so, but you saw the old building, and then you saw the new building. Okay? I'm going to share this a little out of order, but because I think it fits here. When I came downtown in 2000, I was asked to come down to grow the model. Okay? Because what happened inside let me back up because this, and then I'll get to the building and what happened, and maybe that'll help you. So we embedded the full-service community school strategy into our Title I plan, into our full-service community school plan. Now, we built a site council at our school and invited the people to be in our site council to address the 3 goals that the family said they wanted in their community. So where there were gaps and we didn't have the resources we needed to move it forward, those were the community partners that were asked to come to the table initially. Okay? So understanding that that's how we built our site council. We had yearly we hired an outside facilitator because that was really important because I wanted to be part of the process, that did strategic planning with us every year to say, are we on track, okay? So what happened in one of our strategic planning sessions, we decided that we needed to begin to evaluate this model from the onset if we wanted to really grow it. And there was a community partner, and here's how I got to know him, and this is an important story. Is one day I was sitting in my office, a building principal, and I got a call from a child therapist who worked in a residential placement who had one of my kids who had burned his house down. He was a first grader. And this guy said, I understand that you're doing something with community and mental health services and stuff. He said, I don't know what to do with this little boy, and we need a plan. So between Dan and I, we pulled every community agency who had been working with that family to a meeting. The doctors, the mental health providers, the caseworkers, Child Protective Services, everybody. And there were probably 20 people in the room who had never talked to each other before. They all had a piece of the kid, they all had a piece of the family, and they were all doing really good things, but they weren't communicating with each other. And so what was happening is this child's plan was very fragmented, and there were pieces that were absolutely missing to help this kid. So it was the first time they had talked together. So then this is how we got our first site council. I said to Dan, you really need to be part of our site council. So he started coming every Wednesday. Now Dan had a real interest in research and evaluation, and when the idea came up that we needed to be evaluating, he volunteered as a community partner to evaluate our model. So we had a visit from the State Department, looking at our State Department of Title I director came down to do a visit on our school-wide planning process, and we introduced her to Dan and told her we were embedding this strategy into our school-wide plan, which they hadn't really thought, you know, again, how's this going to affect scores? And we said that this strategy would do that. They ended up paying Dan. He was going to volunteer, and they wanted an evaluation of it. So they paid him for 3 years to do a comprehensive evaluation of the community school strategy. And at the end of 3 years, our scores were at 36% of our kids passing. They went to 69. Our discipline referrals plummeted. Our attendance rates went up. And that was the time that they decided to move the strategy deeper. And we built it originally with no money. This did not have any money. This was really about all of us sitting around the table going, what can we put on the table, and how can we think about those resources that we have in a better way? And I will tell you that it was better there was no money. It really was better, because it caused us to really think differently about how we were doing our work. And so that's kind of where we are in that piece. So, did I miss anything? I'm good. All right. So fast forward, and just to finish out the Cedar Hall story, in 2007, we got a new superintendent. And we've had 5 superintendents since I started as a building principal, and this work continues to even grow because we have the social and political will to keep it going, because our community partners and our community parents and everyone are so committed. So in 2007, we took a referendum to the community, and we wanted to do some major renovations in a big capital, a lot of capital work. So what happened was our superintendent went out and met with community. He had meetings even at midnight. That was our best attended meeting. Why do you think? Those parents we never had a meeting where people who worked that shift could come to before. So they came. They thought, this guy's crazy enough to have a meeting at midnight. We're coming. And it was great. And so he took all of this learning. He met on Saturday. He met in the evening. He met during the day. He did not give one person in the community a reason to say they didn't have an opportunity to say what they thought. He did, you know, I mean, they could call him, everything. So at the end of this whole listening to the community, they were going to close Cedar Hall. Because Cedar Hall was over 100 years old. Seriously, people, when it rained, we had water in the basement up to here. I mean, it was the building really needed some work, and it would have cost us a whole lot more to renovate it. So I sat quietly in the room and listened, and thought, oh, and my emotions were like right here, because that was a place that I was really wed to, but I had to be careful that I wasn't, I don't, you guys know what I mean. So I was really kind of quiet. I know that's hard for you to believe, but I was. So when it was time to go back out to the community to present the plan, he went back to all the places that were affected and had meetings with them, with the community residents. So I thought, uh-oh. So I told him, I said, now when you go to Cedar Hall, the room will be packed, and there were more than this many people there. And I said, and they will tell you what they think, and they will be very vocal with you. You need to listen. And at the end, they'll thank you for coming, even though they're going to be mad at you when you're there. And he said, okay. So he gets there, and that's exactly what happened. And I sat in the back of the room by the door, because I wanted to be very respectful. So I sat in the back, and the first person that jumps up is Linda, who did a lot of stuff in our community. She turns around and she points at me and she said, see that lady back there? She gave us a voice 10 years ago, and we're going to use it. And I thought, oh boy. And and she was very respectful, and she told him what that building and what that school and what that full-service community school meant to that community. And she was kind of the leader, the person who took a lot of initiative in our community, and one by one, people started jumping up and talking to him. And he was a great communicator, and he really listened. One by one, they jumped up. The meeting went on for 2 or 3 hours. He made sure every person had an opportunity to tell him what they thought. Then the last person that stood up said, I don't know why we're here. It doesn't make any difference what we say. You've already made up your mind. And he said, no, I haven't. That's why I'm here. Well, by that time, I'm a crying mess, right? I have to go out in the hall. Because these people, that was my defining moment, to know that this really makes a difference, is that that community did have a voice. And they felt empowered and ownership enough to do that. So we walk out in the parking lot after the meeting, and they did. They thanked him. They were so happy that he had come, but they didn't think anything was going to change. Walked out in the parking lot, and the superintendent turned to me and he said, we cannot close this school. So we completely rewrote the strategic plan, and you see a brand new building. And they raised the old building, but what was really cool is the parents in the community actually got to decide what their community school was going to look like. They had meetings, they got to look at the architect's plans, and they got to weigh in. So they were really given a voice, and they still have that voice. So that's the Cedar Hall story. So a little bit about how we went from a school to a district. How many of you were around when the first federal 21st Century Community Learning Center grants came up? When they were written in the federal language, community schools were embedded in the 21st century language. It was like when we saw that RFP on that grant, it was like a perfect fit for what we were trying to do, right? So we wrote, and Dan Deal, who was doing all of our evaluation, is also a great grant writer. So he helped us, and we wrote that first grant. And because we had, by that time, because of the results we were getting, other principals in the community saying, we would like to do this. So we wrote our first grant in 2000, and we received it. And then we wrote a second 21st Century grant in 2001 and received it. So at that point, we went from 1 school to 10 overnight, practically. Okay? And that was the time the superintendent came down and said, would you like to come down to central office? And I said no. And he said, yeah, you really do want to come to central office? I said, no, I really like what I'm doing. And he said, and you know how that goes. So anyway, I came. And I was the director of Title I and the Director of Professional Development for the entire district. So as Director of Title I was able to work with every single school district as they were working on their school improvement plans to talk about how you could really embed this work into your school improvement strategy. Okay, so we worked a lot on that. Here's a list of all of the community partners that we currently have at the table. Now what we did when we moved, now remember we just had one little site council at one school, we called representatives from a lot of these buildings together and created what we call our big table. So these are the community partners who are part of our infrastructure. And we did the exact same thing with them that we did with the community in terms of identifying what we needed to work on to move the work forward and to deepen the work. Okay? Now remember that this big table is really responding to what's happening at the school level from the site councils. So we prioritized. These are the teams that came out of that priority. Actually, health was one area that they said health, and we ended up having to break it down into 3 different health teams because when we unpacked health, it was too big. So we have an asthma and allergy team, a nutrition and physical activities team, and a social emotional learning team. The #1 reason our children were absent from school was asthma-related illness. So that was why we did asthma, nutrition and physical activities, and then social emotional. Those teams are co-chaired by a community partner and a school person. Okay? So we have the big table, which is our networking table, where everybody comes and networks and talks to each other and shares information. The communications team came later, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Evaluation was part of us from the very beginning. Everything that we do with regards to evaluation is vetted through that evaluation team. And remember the gentleman I told you about, the therapist, and well, he became our first director of 21st Century. He came over one day and he was, we had posted the position, and I kind of wrote it because I really wanted him to take the position, but I didn't want to tell him that. So he came over and I said, would you proof this job description and let me know what you think? And then I went to my office, and I sat there, and he said, you know, you sound, and you know, it had his name all over it. He didn't know it. And I mean, and so he said, that might be something I'd be interested in. So he did that for a couple of years, and then we had him doing a lot of evaluation. He had finished his PhD in social work, and he was being tagged to do a lot of that. And he ended up opening his own evaluation and consulting firm. So family, school, and community partnerships actually became one of our core focus areas of our strategic plan. Now, here's why that happened. It happened because our community partners, let me see if I can explain this. You hear the term intermediary all the time. Some community agencies are the intermediary, sometimes it's a school. We're kind of a combined model. In some cases, our community partners take the lead in some things, but we're really the convener. We provide the staff through our office. So we had every community leader, every chief CEO, everybody is part of our community council. So when it came time to identify what our key themes were going to be, what came out? Of course, that. Okay? So family, school, and community partnerships, and at that point I was assistant superintendent of federal projects and actually I went from director of Title I to assistant superintendent, and the position was elevated to associate superintendent. And so they also put early childhood education under that with family, school, and community partnerships. So that became our strategic agenda. So these folks right here are the executive leadership team for the superintendent's office. We meet weekly, we collaborate, and one of our goals is to make sure that we're not operating in 10 different silos, that we're all totally integrated in our work. So we meet weekly, and so our position of associate superintendent is part of the leadership cabinet. Okay? So I thought it would be important for you to kind of see that. That's not the way it was when I was an assistant superintendent. There was a superintendent and 3 assistant superintendents in charge of different areas. Under this leader, he said, we need to do this, and it was really fantastic that that happened. Okay, that's our building. Okay, so the other thing is this building belonged to the bank next door. The bank next door gave us that building for $1. So we pay no overhead, we pay no utility, we pay nothing other than $1, and he keeps kidding us every time he sees us that he doesn't have his dollar. But what we did as a school district is we took every school districts, and I can say that because I am one, but we have a tendency to silo our work also, right? And so what happened was we had a lot of departments inside of our school district that really do address the social emotional needs of kids, but they were operating as their own departments, and they weren't communicating with each other. So what we did is we did a complete revamp of our school district to take all of those things under social emotional supports for kids and put them under one umbrella in one department, and we moved everybody here. And we're in one building. Now the reason that this building is so significant, it's on a bus line. Now, anybody here work in student services? Okay. Our student services department in our old office, the parent would come in, they'd have to check in with the receptionist, then they'd go through this little door, and there was this glass, and they had to talk through this little hole, and then they were let through to come over here and wait in this little room, right? Because we've got to be concerned about safety and security, you know. And they might come in mad. So what we said is, that's our problem. We need to take down the walls. We need to create a building that's family friendly. We need to let our community know we're serious about this work, and we need to let them know that they're welcome to come in and talk to us anytime. So I wish I had a picture. We bought all kinds of great stuff for kids to play. We have a little play area for their kids, and we just let them loose while we're meeting with the parents. Our student services, we meet with every kid who comes back from Department of Corrections. And those kids that walk in are the kids that need us to be the most loving we can to figure out how we're going to help them get to graduation. So they don't have to go up to a little hole in the wall and say, I'm here to see you, and then go into they come in, we offer them water, we have bowls of fruit, we treat them with the respect that they need to be treated with. And every family that comes in that has an issue is treated that way. So every department, we have family support services located there. We have student support services, all of our after school and summer program offices there, extended day, health and wellness, related services, and early childhood education. We actually have our own building now for early childhood too, so we're pretty excited. So all of those departments meet together. Now, the other thing that happened to us, guess what we started doing? We started siloing. Because the work is huge, and everybody gets so incredibly busy that we start doing our own stuff, and we forget that the people around us are the people that can help us move the work. So now we have Monday morning standing meetings every Monday morning that everybody just comes and stands around the desk and says what they're doing that week, and they came up with that idea, and I'm telling you, it changed our world. So, okay. So the other thing that we did is when I first organized our department, family and community schools were over here on this continuum. And that worked for a while, except that the family and community school strategy was what was supposed to go through all of these areas. Okay? So about 2 months ago, I went to the superintendent and I said, I really need somebody at the executive level to do the community school and family engagement work. So we promoted the director of community schools to an executive director of family engagement in community schools, and actually intentionally looked for someone who had very, very strong background in communications. That was what was missing. And I'm telling you, that is the key piece in all of this work. So she has a master's degree from Northwestern University in communications, and she is setting us straight. Now let me tell you. She truly is beginning to change the way we communicate with our families, the way we communicate with our schools, the way we communicate with each other, because we are using so much lingo and language and all of that stuff that we're not moving the work forward in the way we need to because we're not communicating effectively. And we didn't know it. We didn't know it. And she's really changing us tremendously. And it is about the people. It's about getting the right people on the bus. It's about making sure that you have to have some people who are visionaries. You have to have some people who are doers. You have to have some people who know how to do this. And you're constantly assessing your team to make sure you have the right players. And that they're doing the thing that they're best at doing. Sometimes they might be the great people to have on your team, but if they're not the right people, they're not doing the work that they can maximize their assets, then you have a problem. So it was about that too. I put this up here because I wanted to share, this is like, you're like the first people that have seen this, other than the superintendent. So don't take it to the bank. But anyway, our district, how many of you are familiar with RTI? Okay. For those of you who aren't, RTI is response to intervention. Okay? RTI has been around a while. It's become mandated in our state, and it's really about this work. It's just called something else. Because it's about tiered interventions for kids, tiered interventions that are intentional, based on research. Because one of the things that happened in our district is we were over-identifying children of color and of poverty in special education. So we had to be a little bit more systematic in how our approach is. So let me just, I don't have a magic marker, but let me just do this real quick. Oh, here's one. Okay, so here's what RTI looks like for those of you that don't know, and I'm going to add something that you haven't seen before, so you'll like it. All right, so here's RTI. And when RTI was first introduced to the world of education, it was an academic frame, which was only focused on academics. And I'm so glad Lisa said what she said this morning, because it was about test scores, and it was about kids' reading and math scores. And finally somebody woke up and said, it cannot be about just academics. So what RTI is it's a tiered approach where they say 80% of your kids are going to be here, about 20%, 15 to 20% here, and you only have 0 to 5% up here. Okay? These are your most at-risk kids. We had a whole lot more kids here and here than we had here. So this is about getting real clear about what your universal approach is. So now there's an approach that says academics is here and social emotional learning is here. So you're actually looking at a universal approach here for social emotional, a tiered support for kids that need it. That's what we're doing on the universal, on the social emotional, is PBIS. How many of you know what that is? Positive behavior supports. We got to thinking about where does family and community engagement fit on this continuum. As we're bringing our community partners to the table, how intentional are we about what supports kids need, and how are we communicating that to our community partners? Are they at the table when we're having these wraparound meetings like we did with Dan in the very beginning to talk about what kids need, so that these interventions are a little bit more intentional rather than, oh, let's just offer this program or that program or that program. So we decided to add another component to our RTI model. And we decided that it wasn't just this flat academic and social emotional. This is our family engagement piece, okay? And our community engagement piece. So when it's kind of like a cone, when you wrap this around and make a cone, this community schoolwork is going to be connected on the academic side and on the social emotional side. Does that make sense? And we just made a presentation to the school board meeting on Monday night. I wasn't there, but we helped put it together. Well, we're actually saying that the family and community engagement work is our foundation for everything we do. Pretty cool stuff. So what we did on Monday night is we presented this and said more to come. So we're still flushing this piece out to get a little bit better about how we do this. And our next presentation to the school board, our superintendent wanted us to present this. He was so excited about it. He wanted us to present it Monday and said, hold on, we're not ready. We got to really kind of get this. But look here. Here's the Family Engagement Community School coach as part of the PBIS team. Okay, here's the Family Engagement Community School teams, part of all of the other teams that are already becoming embedded inside the school. So we're not an add-on. I will tell you, this is the messiest work I have ever done. It is messy, 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 messy. And if you think it's not going to be messy, then you're in, don't do it. Seriously, it is really messy. Because are relationships ever easy? Anybody here married as long as me, 38 years? Yeah. Good.
40 coming up.
Oh, messy, right? You know, I tell my daughter every time she gets mad at her husband, it's messy, you got to go back and you got to have a conversation. So if you just know that, if you know it's messy, and you know that you're going to have to go back and fix and renegotiate and think about it. The other thing that happened for us, guess what No Child Left Behind did to us? What's the other thing that makes it messy? We're going on 2014. What's one of the consequences of No Child Left Behind? How many of you have had major turnover in leadership at your buildings because of No Child Left Behind? Huge. Huge. Our poor principals, you know, I mean, that have really worked, and then they get, what, 2 or 3 years to turn it around? It doesn't happen in 2 or 3 years. So there's a lot of turmoil going on and a lot of pressure on buildings to get those test scores up because their job depends on it. And they really are, they need you all that are community-based organizations to help them do this. So it really is kind of messy. Does that help for those of you who are worried because it's messy and are going, oh? Here's some of the funding sources that we use and we blend. Special education, Title II, Title III. All of these are resources that we've used and we blended to support the model. So we just blend all that. We're also at a lot, collaboration is a buzzword now, right? There's a lot of collaborations because a lot of grants are saying you need collaborations. We're at every one of these tables, and we're a part of every one of these tables, and we all are figuring out how to work together. One other quick story, and I'm watching my time. I'm going to tell you the story of the Glenwood community because it doesn't always have to be, it really is about assets. So in 2006, Evansville had a major disaster. We had a tornado that ripped through Evansville, and there were 24 people who were killed, and an entire trailer park was decimated, and people lost their homes. I have never, and in fact, people that came from out of the Evansville community into our community could not believe the level of collaboration that occurred in Evansville in terms of people coming together to help people. And they rebuilt, they rebuilt those homes for those people, the services and supports. It was, I can't even tell you. It was amazing. So Lori Reed, who is our Executive Director of Habitat for Humanity, how many of you are familiar with Habitat, came and we had coffee one morning, and she said, how do we create the same sense of urgency that existed in 2006 when people lost their homes around communities that are in trouble? How do we do that? And Habitat's mission is very much about working with community for them to help them build their homes. So what we did is we targeted the Glenwood community, which is another one of our large Title I schools, and we had just passed the referendum where we were going to be investing $10 million on that building in that community. And we did a series of meetings with those folks. And a local architect volunteered and did a charrette as the families were saying what they wanted. But in that situation, Habitat took the lead. We were a player. We were a partner. Now we're moving into another community and doing the same thing. And that's not Habitat. It's not us. It's another community partner. So it's about learning the process, and because no one entity can do it all by themselves. Can't happen. Lessons learned. I think I touched on a lot of these. I think I talked to you about communication. Now, when we realized, the other thing that we did, a couple things. We're the teachers. Yeah. Lesson learned at Cedar Hall. We had these site council meetings on Wednesday mornings, right? All the community partners who was there, you know, we were so proud, and you know, we were figuring it all out. Guess when I was getting the most referrals to the office? I could no longer sit in a meeting for a whole hour because kids were being sent to the office by the teachers. When we mapped the discipline data, I noticed that 9 o'clock on Wednesday mornings was when I was getting the most referrals. Why? Why do you think? You have any idea?
They weren't part of it.
Do what?
They weren't part of the meeting.
They weren't part of the meetings. And so I went and talked to them. I said, I don't get this. We unpacked the data, and they said, well, all those community partners are there. They don't know what we're dealing with every day in our classroom. They need to know. So we freed up teachers so they could come to the table and start sharing the stories, because what we had forgotten was the voice of the people who were closest to the kids, and you know, so don't leave the parents, don't leave the teachers out. So I come to central office and I realize, because of Patricia, that we needed to go back out into the schools and spend some time with our principals, because we had major turnover in principals. Our principals really needed to understand this work. So we decided to do a listening tour. Now, we had a pretty aggressive timeline, and what we said was we were going to make sure that our work that was coming out of the center was really aligned with the needs of the students and the families, and we really wanted to make sure that we were maximizing our resources from the community. So we took our community partners and we went on a listening tour. And every school we went to visit, we sent out a memo to all of our community partners and said, go with us. We set up meetings with the principal, and we went and we just listened. We didn't go in and lecture them about what a community school was. We just had some very basic questions. What community partners are already working with you? What are they doing? What do you need? What do your kids and families need? That's where the mentoring team and the tutoring team are coming from. Those were the two things that they identified. So we had targeted questions. We did some problem solving with them. It was the best thing we ever did. We took 2 months to do it. We asked them for 20 minutes of their time. We ended up staying for 2 hours. They wanted to talk forever about the needs of their kids and families. And then we had to go back and get the low-hanging fruit and do something immediately for them. We came back and did our notes and found the low-hanging fruit, because if we could do something for them immediately that would address the need, they knew we were serious. Because how many times do you go out and do that, then you go back to your office and nothing happens? And it was important to us to make sure that that happened. So what we did, we had tons of stuff. I mean, we had so many results because we mapped everything. We had some tools that we mapped everything that we had. So now we're up to challenges. This list could go on and on and on, but internal and external, we are constantly navigating our relationships with our community partners, as well as internally with our school population. Our principals and our schools are overwhelmed. There is so much pressure on educators right now. Our teachers are assessing, they are working so hard. In our state is a right-to-work state. So in 2014, their contract is going to change drastically. It's very scary for our teachers, and we're worried about that, and we're trying to diminish the their anxiety. They want good teachers in the classrooms as much as we do. We have a couple of models that have emerged in our school district called equity schools, where we have a great working relationship with our teacher union. We have lots of good stuff happening there, and I know that Keith Gamble, who's president of our teachers union, has got a webinar. He was part of a webinar with the Coalition for Community Schools on what that partnership looked like, and there's a lot of good tools on that website. Communication, acronyms, family-friendly stuff. I can't even emphasize that enough. We did a workshop with emerging leaders in our district recently, and we took one of the letters that went home to parents, and we asked them to highlight all the words in that letter that were acronyms that parents wouldn't understand. And we looked at it, the whole letter was highlighted. And, you know, and I mean, really, seriously, what are we doing? And then we said, let's go back with another marker and highlight all the friendly words in that letter, like please and thank you and we really care. Sincerely was there, and dear, you know, I mean, we got to really watch that stuff, you know. So we actually, in our office, have volunteered to rewrite any letter that goes home to parents and to look at and give feedback on newsletters so that that stuff gets better. Leadership change. Well, one quick story. We have on our website this website for parents to go to where they can go and look at their kids' grades. And we have, in our state, we have a thing called iStep where it's an A if they're above, a P if it's pass, and a B if it's below. So we're working with the library to do some workshops for parents. And this one, we piloted at Cedar Hall actually, and one parent, they were explaining what that meant, and a parent went, I thought B meant my child passed, and it was below. And so we made some assumptions that they understood what that meant. So that kind of thing. Leadership change, turnover, that's this part of this thing where you have to go back and make sure everybody knows where you're at, because sometimes you keep going like this and you think everybody's on with you and you've had some major leadership change and you have to go back. We've had a lot of change and turnover in community CBO leadership, and so same thing there. The other thing we had to do is really think about this as not a program. When we started doing this, people thought full-service community schools were a program. It was a thing. My vision, or my like if I could think about this, I would love to see us not calling it anything, that it becomes so embedded in the way we do business that it doesn't have a name. It would be just like saying we're not going to have math class anymore. You know, it would be so much a part of our fabric that we would just be doing it without calling it something. You know, the magnitude is, you know, where do you start? If I were going to tell you where to start, if you're just thinking about this work, I would really start with really mapping your assets, looking at what your challenges are, putting those together, and don't try to eat the elephant all at one time. Pick one or two goals that you start working on, and then it will emerge. I think sometimes people they get these strategic plans that have like a zillion things, and then they're so big that you can't get any traction. Our challenges are, you know, people still sometimes wonder who we are and what we do. You know, I was at a principal meeting the other day, said, now, where's that building? And I'm going, guys, we've been here 4 years. We've received a lot of national recognition for our work. Doesn't always equal local pride, because when you're inside your own community, like I can come here and you guys, maybe you think I'm doing some really good stuff, but they might not know that back in Evansville because I live there. I'm with them every day. So sometimes you kind of have to kind of balance that. We're not the grant people. You know, sometimes it's they're the grant people, they're the people that have the money. We're not the grant people. The grants are there to support the work. We're not the grant people. The other, you know, community supports are not just about fun. They really are intentional, meaningful interventions and supports for kids and families. And they have to be viewed just as important as the math class and all of the other things that are going on inside schools. Sometimes we don't know who's doing what, where. We get so busy inside of our department that sometimes everybody is out doing really, really good work, but because we're not coming together and communicating. So I meet with every director, every person in our department once a week, and we have a standing hour meeting where we're making sure that we're all on the same page. We continue to make sure that we can communicate how these supports are working and how they support student success. And we think we know what kids and families mean, but do we? And if I had to say anything to you today is don't lose sight that we are servants. And the voice of the community and the people we serve need to drive this work. And sometimes we lose that. We need to better integrate our work into academic achievement. We need to be able to show how it's supporting academic success. Doesn't need to mean that all of our community partners are teaching math and reading. It doesn't mean that. But we know that our kids who participate, and that was where my PhD was on, our kids who participate on a regular basis in after-school programs have significantly better attendance and much better test scores. And I'm not talking about tutoring. I'm talking about kids being connected to another adult, to other kids, and staying on track and having safe places to go. Speaking the same RTI language, now we're talking RTI. Everybody's talking RTI. So we're part of that conversation as community schools. We can't just say, well, we're community schools, we're not RTI. The district is embracing RTI. Where does this fit, and how do we embed our language in RTI? And then just a few of our successes. You have to end with kids. Coordinated school health team. We have a Camp Nottagunawese that we do. Yeah, that's pretty cool. That we do with our community partners during spring break. Healthier Evansville. We partnered with our community to do that. Lights on after school. Summer programs and lunch programs, before and after school programs. All of this is being done. And we have a very strong partnership with our city. We could not do this without our city and without our mayor. Now, the other thing I didn't tell you is the executive director that we hired is our former First Lady. That didn't hurt. And she's amazing. But our partnership with the city of Evansville has been amazing. So we have strong partnerships. And I'll end with one story about Westbrook Cottage. We have a very high, a school that has very high performance. They have over 900 kids. They're an elementary school. But they have 300 kids inside of their school. So they don't qualify to be a Title I school because they don't have a high enough percentage. So, but they have over 300 kids that live in a trailer park, which is probably the worst trailer park in our entire Evansville community. It's a community of its own. And this teacher, who actually taught at Cedar Hall, I hired her, had it in her brain that we were getting rid of portable classrooms. Could she have one? Now I'm downtown. Sure, you can have one. And so that Westbrook Cottage is one of the old trailers, and it's converted to a community center inside the park, in the trailer park. And there's tutoring and our after-school programs, and our community partners are working on that. And we've been, as a result of us, we are an All-American City. We were part of the All-American City application in 100 Best Cities for Youth. There's a whole lot of other things, and our website is being developed right now. We have a brand new website, so there'll be a lot of information on there for you. I'm watching my time, Kendall. And then I'm a kindergarten teacher. And if you think about Robert Fulghum and what he says about kindergarten, and you go through and you list all of these things that kids need to know in kindergarten, isn't that community schools? Share everything, play fair, don't hit people, clean up your own mess, don't take things that aren't yours. This is a biggie. Say you're sorry when you hurt somebody. You know how many times a day I say I'm sorry? Live a balanced life. That's the other thing that I would tell you. If I could go back and change anything in my life, it would be that perhaps I didn't balance. Because this work is all-consuming, and you will be there 24/7. And make sure you rejuvenate yourself and that you take care of yourself, because that'll make you a better leader. And wouldn't it be great if we could take a nap every day? Yeah. And remember the biggest word of all, and that's look. So thank you very much.
And before you take that mic off, I think we do have time for a couple questions.
Oh, good. Okay.
So I wanted to start with one that we actually have discussed a little bit over the past couple months. But you've spoken a lot about balancing between being a catalyst for this work, but also institutionalizing the work so that it doesn't just sit on the shoulders of one or two people. And I was wondering if you could unpack that a little bit for the group and share what you've done policy-wise with the family engagement and the wellness policies, or different infrastructure examples. You mentioned embedding the work into the fabric of the district and the school, and also having the community own it. But if there are any other examples of infrastructure or policy?
We have done, in fact, the family engagement and community engagement policy is being reviewed now and will go to the board. And so we are embedding policy into our school district about this. The wellness policy is an interesting negotiation because our healthcare community said, you know, we want a stronger healthcare health and wellness. Why do you think schools resisted the wellness policy? A little bit.
Fundraising.
It's fundraising, and we took all, you know, soft drinks out of the schools and all that stuff, and schools were really concerned that their hands were being tied because their funds were limited. So we had to really, you know, kind of work through some of that. The other part of your question, I think I talked about this a little bit, and it's probably a lesson learned, is there was a lot of spotlight on Cedar Hall and the successes, and I don't say this in I told Kendall this when she asked me to come. I'm really, really, really a very, very shy person, and people don't realize that about me. I was really scared about coming here because I don't do this really well, so I really worried about it. So we had a wonderful superintendent who shined the spotlight on our work a lot, and I think I shared this with you, and it got shined on me a lot. And so we've really been working on this is not about me at all. I mean, our community partners are amazing. So if you're really going to move it to really an embedded strategy, make sure that you share the glory, because one of the things that happens, and one of the reasons sometimes these collaborations don't work, is our community partners sometimes feel like they're losing their identity inside of our model, because we're kind of the convener. So we're doing a better job at making sure that we're highlighting and sharing the glory for this work. And we're being very intentional about it. And Patricia, and that's basically why we hired Patricia's position and somebody who was really good at communication. When the press calls now, and they do about once a week for an interview, I very rarely go on camera anymore. And it's either a community partner who goes on camera, or a principal, or a teacher, or somebody else. Because unless that was a lesson learned. Does that help? Yeah.
Any questions from the group? Okay, I see Misha in the back.
Yeah. So as Oakland's moving forward to a full-service community school district, right now we have many school sites where administrators are taking that lead and wanting to do this work and are doing it. But as moving towards a district with 100 schools, maybe not every administrator is either concerned about what work this may take on for me now as extra work, and then also for new administrators coming on. And how did you guys take it in terms of messaging it to your current administrators who are maybe, is this more work for me? Also for new administrators coming in, and then what was the expectation, and then how did you manage that?
The turning point for us was when it became one of the 5 core focus areas of the district's strategic plan, and when the superintendent was identifying it as a priority. The other thing, though, that's important is giving the schools the autonomy to develop it around the needs of their kids and their families, and giving them a voice. Sometimes it's kind of a tricky balance, you know. in terms of saying, here's a script and you need to do this, as opposed to we're here, this is our philosophy. We're here at the Center for Family, School, and Community Partnerships to support you. And that's why the listening tours were so important, because they did feel like initially that it was some kind of mandate that they had to do and they couldn't figure out how to do it. And that's why we did the chart with marrying it into RTI and showing them how it's not an extra program or an extra thing. But the principals need to feel like they own it, and that and the teachers too. So we're responding to what they say they need. I don't know if that helps, but that's what we're trying.
And kind of piggybacking off that, Misha, one of the beautiful things about the full service community school strategy is that you're able to, it's flexible, so you can adjust it to meet the individual needs of your community or school site. So, you spoke about the macro kind of listening tour and the big table planning process that you had, as well as the school sites where the community members actually identified and prioritized needs. How often do you repeat those processes to make sure that it's kind of fresh and updated?
Well, that actually opened the door, and the schools are now calling every day. You come over, let's have a conversation. So that really kind of let them know where we were and that we were being responsive. That changed how they felt about us. That's awful, us and them. It's not really supposed to be an us and them. So when a principal calls, I drop everything and do what they need me to do to make sure that they get the needs of their kids and families met. We had a situation just last week, horrible situation, where the principal had 2 students who were, the mother had been incarcerated the night before. Now, see, principals deal with this stuff every single day. The mother had been incarcerated the day before. The child was told to just take the city bus to some Jessica's house, no last name, and get off at Jessica's house, and that was it. Principal said, that ain't happening. How do I know who Jessica is? How do I know she's even going to be home? And it's cold, and what happens, So she called Child Protective Services. Child Protective, well, the mother said, put her on the city bus, put her on the city bus. And she called and said, what do I do? I said, that ain't happening. So the principal drove the child to the house. Of course, nobody was there. Then I said, I was doing a presentation and I was running out to troubleshoot with the principal. Ended up that they took the child down to Child Protective Services. They said, bring the child down. Well, it was totally not handled correctly. Now, Child Protective Services is one of our great partners. So what I could do is I asked her to put in writing, what happened. I had coffee with the director of Child Protective Services who did not know that situation happened. They're doing a major overhaul and making things better. That's my role. Because that not only helped that school and that principal's problem, it helped everybody, but I had the relationship with the community partner to be able to help do that.
What are the demographics in your district, and are the majority of your children and parents English speaking?
Yes. We have a growing Hispanic population in our community. We're mostly white. We have about 30% African American. Our Hispanic population is growing between 15 and 20%. In fact, one of the partners, we work with OLA, which is an organization that works to support our Hispanic population, and we gave her office space inside of our building so that our Hispanic families, when they can't come in, have access to some support. So, yeah.
Any other questions from the audience?
Real quickly, there's one book, and I don't know if it's the one you recommend here, Full Service, that you could recommend, highly, strongly recommend to admin who are, it's their job to teach, towards the test or make sure that to convince them of the value of this full service, the community schools, community partners.
Sue McGuire and Joy Dreyfus wrote a book after this book on full service community schools, and Sue McGuire was a building principal, and they wrote it together. So I bought that book for all of the building principals, which is really a good book. And I just think it's full service community schools, and it's by Sue McGuire and Joy Dreyfus. I will tell you one of the best resources, and all of those resources are listed, is if you go to the National Coalition for Community Schools website. There are all kinds of tools. Examples all across the country are there, and that website has everything and anything that will help too.
But just one piece that would convince the naysayers.
That book, I mean, that's why I bought that book, yeah.
All right, so I know Dr. Gray said she was shy, but if we can just give her a round of applause for that.